Hello and welcome to today's Global Fleet Champions webinar on getting the most out of your telematics data, sponsored by Mixed Telematics. Global Fleet Champions is a partnership campaign administered by Brake, the road safety charity, to prevent deaths, injuries and pollution caused by vehicles driven for work. To learn more about the campaign and what we do, please visit globalfleetchampions.org. During today's webinar, we will discuss what data to capture with telematics systems, methods for analysing data for positive results, and how to engage drivers with telematics data and reduce road risk. In a minute, we will present you with a multiple choice question poll so we can find out your views. It is anonymous. Simply select one answer and press confirm, and we will discuss the results at the beginning of the Q&A session, which is your opportunity to ask today's presenters a question. You can put forward your questions at any time during the webinar by using the chat box on the webinar panel. I'd like to say a big thank you again to today's sponsor, Mixed Telematics. The poll question will appear on your screen shortly, and the webinar will then begin. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Glen Mitchell. I'm the Head of Product Management at Mixed Telematics. And today we're going to be talking about how you can get the most out of your telematics data. Firstly, an introduction. Electronic recording systems, commonly known as telematics, enable a huge amount of data to be collected about trips, vehicles, and driver behaviour. They're a valuable tool for any organisation that wants to manage the risk related to transport operations. This technology offers a wide range of benefits linked to safety, efficiency, customer satisfaction, and other business outcomes. Today, we're going to find out how you can get the most out of your telematics data to make your operation more sustainable. In the webinar, we will learn what data to capture with telematics systems, methods for analysing data for positive results, and how to engage drivers with telematics data and reduce road risk. So why is this important to Mixed Telematics? As a technology service provider for commercial transport operations, our success lies in our ability to help our customers achieve all available benefits. It's only when the customer adapts their business and leverages the fleet information our offering provides can goals be reached. Customers need to have an understanding of the role their people play in the fleet management process, including when it comes to data analysis, informed decision making, and taking action. Only deploying the technology and not engaging with it will lead to customers missing out on a return on their investment.
So hello everyone, and thanks Brake for allowing me to share my thoughts on telematics data, getting the most out of it and what you should look for. And I put a very simple agenda together for today's session. I thought we'd first look at what the benefits of telematics data are, and then look at some more specifics about what you should be looking at and what you should be doing with that data. So what are the benefits of telematics data? I think the best way to look at that is to see how telematics data can enhance your work-related road risk management program. Where does it fit in? And this is based on the proven health and safety management approach of plan, do, check, and act, but as it applies to work-related driving. Now, I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about the plan stage in a minute, but I guess the first area that telematics data can enhance is your risk profiling. Now, generally, we're talking about risk assessments here. So this will be a snapshot in time of the risk that a particular employee faces. You know, things like the driver, the journeys they're making, the vehicles they're using, the driver's core competencies. That will be a typical risk assessment. But as I say, it's a snapshot in time. What telematics data allows you to do is to get a better flavour of the actual risks today that that employee is facing when they're driving. More live data, more dynamic data. If we move on to the check phase of the process, well, we've got leading and lagging indicators here. Now, normally when we're checking on how effective our program is, we're looking at collisions. And of course, that's something that's very lagging, something that's already happened. What telematics data can allow us to do is get a flavour of how an employee's driving, looking at the trends in their behaviours, that may give us an early warning that something's wrong and so that we need to do something to hopefully intervene before a collision occurs. So it's a leading indicator. And I guess the other area in the check phase is your root cause analysis. So when you're doing a driver debrief after a collision, telematics data can provide some color to that conversation. So you can look at the data and how the driver was driving in the run up to the collision, and potentially some of the data sort of at the collision sort of time can help you get down to the underlying root cause of why that crash occurred in the first place. Now, I said I'd come back to talk about the plan phase. This is something called foundation policies, or the framework policies, that I think you need to have in place before you put telematics into your vehicles. Now, an ex-colleague and good friend of mine used to describe it like this. Now, if you put telematics in your vehicles today and you look at the data tomorrow, you're going to find lots of drivers speeding. It's an inevitability. And then the question comes about, well, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to manage it? And unless those sorts of things are addressed in your policies and procedures, then you've got no hope of performance managing that within your business. So those underlying framework and foundation policies need to be in place before you start using telematics data. The other area I think is important is that of line managers, because I strongly believe that in larger organizations, it's not the fleet or transport manager who should be engaging with the driver about the telematics data. It should be their manager or supervisor. They're the controlling mind. They are best placed to ask the question, what have we done as an organization that may have contributed to these observed exceptions and trends in the telematics data? Because it's all too easy to assume it's just down to poor driving. There may be an underlying reason at an organizational level why that is occurring. You know, for example, the driver's schedule may have changed, their routes may have changed, their manager may have changed. There could be a reason at an organizational level where that's occurred. And if you don't explore that, you're never going to get to the underlying reason of why these collisions, why these exceptions and trends in telematics data are occurring. And it's exactly the same process. I mentioned collisions just a minute ago. That's exactly the same process when you're doing a post-collision review. You know, what have we done as an organization that may have contributed to this crash occurring? So what should you monitor? What data should you be looking at? Well, if we start looking at the 4 main reasons for serious collisions, one of those, impaired driving, there's probably not a lot telematics data can do with that, unless you've got driver-facing cameras. Then you might get some insight. But the other 3 main reasons you can look at. So we start with inappropriate speed. When I talk about speed, this is speed against the posted speed limit of the road, or if the telematics data provider is able to look at this, the speed against the average speed for that road on that day at that time of day, because both of those can give insights into whether the driver's perhaps driving a little bit too fast. And I'd be much more concerned about speeding in urban areas where there's lots of vulnerable road users compared to speeding on faster roads, although all speeding is bad, but that's where my focus would be initially. Distracted driving is possible to monitor. Not all telematics systems can do this. Hardwired telematics systems, you know, the so-called black boxes, unless they're linked to mobile phone databases, will struggle with this. But a lot of solutions now are on people's smartphones. So absolutely, there's the capability to monitor whether that smartphone is in use whilst the employee is driving. Now, clearly, there's lots of other distractions that go on when somebody's driving, but smartphones are one of the biggest concerns at the moment because they are so distracting from the task of driving. And one of the things that all telematics systems are capable of, but not many report on, and I don't know why this is a measure of fatigue. You know, because potentially you can look at the total length of working day, including driving, and if the driver is taking their vehicles home in the morning, leaving in the morning and going back at night as their home base, you can look at the total length of working day plus commuting. That's going to give you some real insights into whether fatigue and tiredness is going to be a problem. You can also look at on longer journeys how often breaks are being taken and how long those breaks are. all interesting and insightful information that's going to allow you to manage risk better. And if we look at sort of generalized driving, then we've got the classic data that comes from telematics systems, the ABCs, the acceleration, braking, and cornering. We're looking at trends in here, we're looking at exceptions. Now, acceleration is an interesting one because there are a few occasions where perhaps you would want your drivers to accelerate more harshly than usual. For example, if they're on a short slip road trying to get up to the speed of the traffic in lane 1 so they can join the road safely. But generally, acceleration will be seen as an example of risk taking, obviously bad for eco driving and the amount of fuel used, so some insights there. Braking is probably where most focus is here. We're looking at the trends in harsh braking. And of course, going back to my earlier point, we don't know why the driver's harsh braking. It could be they're driving too fast, too close to the vehicle in front. They could be impaired, fatigued, distracted. There could be a whole range of reasons why drivers are harsh braking. So that's very insightful. But just a word of warning here, we shouldn't discourage harsh braking, because harsh braking can be the difference between having a crash and not having a crash. Safe driving is all about eliminating the need to brake harshly. So it's the trends that we should be particularly interested here, and your messaging has to be very clear here. We don't want drivers to not brake harshly in an emergency situation just because they think they might get into trouble when they have the debrief with their manager. And cornering, yeah, if the lateral forces are too high when people are cornering, then they risk skidding, they risk going onto the wrong side of the road and colliding with oncoming traffic, or they risk single vehicle collisions where they just run off the road. So we started off this short session just by looking at where telematics fits in. That live dynamic risk assessment data that's giving you in the overall risk management program. The leading indicator, so hopefully you can spot trends, spot something's wrong before a collision occurs, and providing color into post-collision debriefs. And then we looked at the data. Whilst we can't do anything about impaired driving, we do get lots of data about speeding, about distracted driving potentially, and about fatigue if we can get that data from our telematics service provider. And using that along with the harsh braking, harsh acceleration, harsh cornering trends, if we get this right, we should be able to bring about a sustainable reduction in our collision rates, saving costs, but most importantly, keeping our employees and those that they share the roads with safe. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining today. It's a pleasure to be part of this insightful and informative webinar about getting the most out of your telematics data. I'm Jim Noble. I'm the eDriving Senior Vice President of Risk Engineering. And a brief introduction about eDriving. eDriving is a global driver risk management company that has been helping organizations around the world manage driver risk for about 25 years now. We actually developed and launched the world's first defensive driving CD-ROM back in the 90s, and today we support over 1 million drivers, 96 different countries, and over the past 25 years, our programs have been recognized with over 100 awards around the world. Mentor is our smartphone-based telematics solution that collects and analyzes driver behaviors and looks at most of these behaviors for predicting future crash risk and helps to remediate risky behavior by providing and engaging in interactive micro-training modules that help the driver change their at-risk stance. Okay, as we get into this, the first thing we really want to talk about is why are you considering telematics? Why are you considering doing this in the first place? Many companies use telematics, or what I call in-vehicle intelligence, for cost reductions like fuel efficiency, sustainability goals, improved engagement, or operational benefits such as scheduling, for scheduling or geofencing. I'd love to think, because of what I do, that your primary reason for introducing telematics is safety. And so that's largely what I'm going to be focusing on here today. With regards to driver safety, telematics can deliver numerous benefits. For example, it can really help you measure at-risk behaviors such as speeding, harsh acceleration, braking, cornering, and seatbelt use. What a lot of people might not realize is that if you incorporate smartphone-based telematics, you can also measure something that's very important today, and that's distraction. And you may not also know that smartphone-based telematics programs can be combined with other in-vehicle systems that give you a broad-based behavior insights along with operational benefits. You know, the operational benefits, as I mentioned above, are cost savings from fuel, maintenance, reduction in claims, reduction in idling, reduction in overtime claims. You can measure vehicle mileage. Some companies want to track location, and sometimes it's for vehicle security. So to go back to the main point here, it's really important that you have a clear vision of why you want to introduce telematics in order to introduce the most suitable supplier and partner. At the end of the session, I'm going to provide some questions for you that you may want to ask when you're considering selecting a supplier. It's also really important to remember that when you introduce telematics as part of a driver safety program, its purpose should never be to monitor employees. Now, we talked about tracking where the vehicle is and understanding where it is in location to its next stop or geofencing, something like that. But that's different from monitoring employees and where they are. So there's a big distinction there, and make sure that you think about that, and really never introduce telematics as purely negative negative consequences or a gotcha program. It should really be there to help your organization align with the global vision of zero fatalities, zero serious injuries on the road, and should be there for the benefit of employees and their families and the communities where they live and work. Telematics introduced as part of a safety program can also help you achieve your organization's sustainability targets by helping you plan more efficient routes and reduce fuel and idling, like I talked about a little bit ago. So here's something that I really warn against when we're talking about telematics programs, and it happens time and time again. So a company introduces a telematics program to their drivers. The drivers know that their actions are being monitored, so they become hyper aware of their driving behavior. The immediate results from this really show positive change in driver behavior and safety. Wow, you know, and you get this feeling of, wow, this program is really working. And then the effect just kind of diminishes over time because there's really nothing else to go along with sticking the telematics unit in the vehicle or on the phone. You know, just think about this like a weight loss program where, you know, people start out, they really have these great intentions, they do everything they can, they see a lot of benefits up front, you know, they start to lose a lot of weight up front. They think, okay, this is working pretty good. We kind of relax a little bit, and before you know it, they're not doing so well. You know, the weight is creeping back on. But if you take on the challenge as part of a group and you share that mission, that's what a lot of these programs are about today around physical fitness and weight loss. It's the same thing with telematics. You have to get a little bit of interaction going on there. You have to be able to be supported by a wider community. You have to have engagement and interaction. So if you don't want to get into these plateaus, let me show you a little bit about what a plateau looks like. This is from a real case study that we did with more than one client, but this is from one client. You can see what a visual plateau looks like. You invest the time in the program, the data is informed to use, the data is used to inform the program. There's fresh messaging, and the next thing you know, it goes on autopilot, and you can see it's really just kind of flattening out and then starting to creep back up. Gets a little bit of fresh eyes on it, comes down a little bit, but then starts to creep back up a little bit. So remember, when you're doing this, you're really talking about human behaviors, and we talk about this all the time. But it's very important to reinforce the fact that really 94% of collisions are caused by human behavior. That's what we're trying to measure with telematics. Very, very important that you don't forget that if you take your eye off the ball, people will go back to what they did before. So it says, there's a question that comes up time and time again. It says, well, can't telematics change behavior? And the answer is really a resounding yes. Telematics can really reveal a lot of information that can help you understand what drivers are doing on the road, but you still have to reinforce, what do you have to do to change that aggressive behavior, and make sure that you do things like leave enough following distance, you corner properly, you're not jackrabbit starting, those types of things. Telematic data really also provides hard evidence that can help managers, because remember I talked about being a community, really can help managers when they're discussing these performance behaviors with the driver. Keep in mind, this is a performance measurement, just like it is if you're doing any other performance measurement, whether that's deliveries on time, whether it's the quality of work you're doing for service, whatever it may be. These are performance metrics that you're measuring. So why does that plateau actually happen? So once the telematics environment has become a norm, complacency really sets in. Now, and that's really just normal human behavior. There may be a feeling that improvements in risk really they can't go any further. This is the best we can get, or other pressures seep in and focus is lost. So the initial message around safety and driving behavior, it kind of loses its intensity, and managers prioritize other issues because they're getting hammered on other issues, and so they're pushing that out to the drivers. And drivers, if you don't switch up your communications, if it doesn't become part of your DNA, they really kind of become numb to the communications. Personal level, drivers really, they get used to the vehicle recording them. They know that someone's observing their behavior, but nobody's really paying attention because there's no impact. So they really stop. They really go back to their original behaviors. At the organizational level, there might be other operational pressures. We got to get more stops in. We have to visit more people. Whatever you're using your vehicle for, those operational pressures start to take hold. And internal campaigns become stale, and communications from the C-suite decline. All those types of things that you would normally think about here, why people take their eye off the ball, is why the program plateaus. So let's talk a little bit about how you can curtail that, how you can actually keep your eye on the ball with the program. Organizations that introduce telematics as part of a driver safety solution, without having a safety culture, they're really less likely to experience long-term benefits. It's really important that your safety culture is embraced and communicated throughout the organization, and it's a management mission, not just a fad of the day. The fad of the day will not get you long-term results. It'll get you some short-term results, but not long-term. This really means that creating a set of shared attitudes and values and goals across the organization is what you have to do. You know, some of these key elements that you might think about are things like creating ambassadors throughout the organization, people who really focus on this, and it's really part of their job to help the organization focus on it. It's like having captains of the football team. And also, you have to do empowerment. You have to let people know that that you know that really what they do matters and what they say matters. Now we talk to, you hear about this all the time, but I want to emphasize this. Communication and engagement around telematics programs are extremely important. Communication and engagement, it's not just a checkbox, it's not just things to do. Regular communication is critical to keep the safety message, at the front of everybody's mind. Because remember, this is an accepted risk. People have always done what they've done around driving. You're asking them to change, and it takes the time to change behavior, and communication can really help that. But it's really important to balance that with messaging that is varied and is communicated in a number of different ways, so it doesn't become stale. And also remember, we talked a little bit about this, coaching and training. This is a performance measurement like every other performance measurement you have, and you coach and you train on those performance measurements. So it's no difference with it's no different with telematics information or any other safety metrics, like, why did the crash happen, or, why are you repeatedly having near misses? Coaching is just another form of communication. And it's really a great way to communicate problem areas, but also rewards and recognition that, that you pat on the back for good behavior. Now, as you're getting ready to do your telematics program, or possibly you already have one going, you've plateaued, you're looking for reasons to get engaged, either maybe with another provider, or re-engage your provider and get them, use the tools that they have to help you broaden your program to get more information out of it. Here's just a couple questions that you need to consider and help you, this will really help you determine your strength and the strength of your safety culture. So do employees really know that their safety is important to your organization? Now you can write down anything you want about employees, about this being important, but what you do actually shows what's important. How many deliveries do you have scheduled in a day? How many appointments do you have scheduled in a day? Those types of things. If you have way too many scheduled than they can possibly get done, that really shows that that you may say safety is important, but it's not actually. Your colleagues need to see and feel and hear that road safety is important. And every decision that you make in the organization really should be about road safety and getting these people home safely at the end of every day. Is it part of your core values? Is it part of your DNA, your beliefs, your attitudes? Is, again, as we talked about, calling it at eDriving a crash-free culture. And do your employees receive the coaching that they need? Now remember that the people on the front lines who are giving the coaching also aren't used to doing this. So once you flood them with the information that is coming out of the telematics program, you have to be aware of the fact that they're not used to doing that either, and they'll need help to do that. So just real quickly before we move on, a word about privacy. We stated at the beginning that telematics is really part of the safety program and should be there to help align your goals with zero fatalities and zero road injuries, and really should be an ultimate benefit to your employees, not a gotcha program. So the message is important here to keep in mind that you have to think about addressing the privacy concerns that come along with gathering this data. Just the word telematics is enough to trigger privacy alarm bells, not only from the driver, but also from different company teams like HR, legal, or if you have internal privacy teams. Now, we've learned that addressing this up front is really the only way to take care of it. If it's one of the last things in the project of implementing telematics, you're going to have an extreme hard time. You have to tackle privacy up front, make sure it matches up with the rest of your company privacy concerns and policies, and that that you're addressing common privacy concerns like, is this a tracking tool? Are you, seeing where, if I'm stopping at the pub on the way home or something like that, how are you using location and GPS data, those types of things. Get to it right up front and make sure that it's aligned. Okay, so privacy is a very important part. Depending on where you are in the world, privacy concerns might extend beyond the company. It might go to unions or work councils, those types of things. Your telematics suppliers, we do a lot of this, should be able to work with you to progress the project through discussions at all levels, whether it's workers' councils or unions or whatever it may be. So some helpful things to help you clear up some of those questions for suppliers, like I talked about before. Does the program include tools that help you secure leadership's commitment and develop a safety culture? Remember, when you're communicating out to the drivers, you also have to think about how you're communicating up to the rest of the organization. Does the program include privacy policies like I just talked about? Does the driver have to pledge that they're driving safely? And do you get onboarding support from that supplier? Does the supplier work with you to address the privacy concerns? And does the program motivate drivers with gamification and engagement and those types of things? One of the things we talk about with the mentor program at eDriving, and it's a very important point for you to think about, our drivers really engage with the app about 5 times a day, and that's an extremely high engagement level because they're looking at how was that trip, where can I improve? They're looking at things like the FICO Safe Driving Score, those types of things. So they're really engaged with the program. And as anybody who's done much risk management knows, that level of engagement will really help drive improvement through the organization. Does the program facilitate reward and recognition for safe driving? That's just as important as looking at the at-risk behaviors and helping with improvement. So that really concludes my part of today's session. Thanks a lot for listening to me today. I appreciate it. I hope that you found it useful. Please don't hesitate to get in touch if you'd like to learn more about eDriving smartphone-based telematics program called Mentor. We can really help you with those things we were talking about with at-risk behavior insights, such as phone use and the things that are hard to track, and coaching and gamification. My email address is on the screen, and it's part of the webinar content. Please do not hesitate to reach out. And thanks again.
Getting the most out of your telematics data. So where to start? Before understanding how to get the most out of your telematics data, you need to have a clear understanding of the business problems you are trying to solve. Typically, we see customers with these types of problems, ranging from optimizing real-time transport operations focused on meeting customer expectations, service delivery, to improving business process efficiency, improving driver safety, optimizing fuel and energy efficiency, reducing asset total cost of ownership, including maintenance costs, and ensuring safety and compliance obligations are met. So we're going to get into what data and information is required to solve these problems. But before we do that, this is a graphic we like to use at Mix Telematics, which tells us why these types of problems are important. Now, fuel efficiency, for example, fuel in a transport operation is typically the second largest operational cost within a fleet. Vehicle uptime is influenced by fleet maintenance, and fleet maintenance is typically the third largest operational cost within a fleet and has probably the biggest proportional impact on vehicle availability or uptime. But what is number one when it comes to fleet operational costs is typically driver-related payroll costs. So your drivers are an important part of your transport operation, and they also have one of the biggest influences on all of the outcomes in your business around vehicle asset life, return on investment on those assets, operating costs, customer satisfaction, and compliance. And so that's where driver engagement becomes really important, and we'll talk a bit about that later. So let's talk about telematics data specifically. Now we've got an understanding of the type of business problems that our customers want to solve. So data acquisition, we can get data from different places. Obviously the telematics, the onboard computer or the black box is the one that we're all familiar with and has been around for a long time. And they come in varying degrees of intelligence and capability. And also they can be connected to the CAN bus of the vehicle to pick up other data from other sensors that are installed in the vehicle by the vehicle manufacturer. We also have in-cab video, and in the past we've had sort of dumb video that doesn't do much apart from record things, but in the last couple of years we're starting to see machine vision enabled in-cab video, which is much more sophisticated and is a very rich source of information around driver behavior. And lastly, we have another source of data that's important in the telematics or fleet management space comes from drivers about what they're doing. And typically there's a mobile app for driver engagement where we can get an understanding of the role that they play in the broader process of managing a fleet. From the vehicle's perspective around data, there's things like real-time location, utilization of those vehicles. Are they standing idle? Are they moving? Where are they idle? Where are they moving to? Fuel and energy, how much of each are we putting into these vehicles and how quickly are they burning through that? And vehicle health data as well. And what these talk to in this sort of middle column of grey and green blocks there, these are the outcomes that I mentioned earlier. So when we're looking at vehicle data, the vehicle data is applicable to optimizing your fleet, improving customer satisfaction, especially around real-time location data, fuel efficiency clearly, vehicle uptime with maintenance or health-related information, and overall from a productivity and continuous improvement perspective. And what we typically see is customers can leverage vehicle data to achieve significant improvements in fuel efficiency and significant reductions in wear and tear on vehicle assets. And of course, we know from experience, and our data proves that, is that poorly driven vehicles are less energy efficient and have a higher TCO, or total cost of ownership, which leads us into drivers and where they fit into this, because they're the ones that do the poor driving or the good driving, depending on how well they go. So with the data sources between the onboard computer and the in-cab video solutions, for example, and the mobile apps, we can pick up data related to driving performance, which is whether they're speeding, whether they're braking too harshly or accelerating too harshly. We can pick up now with machine vision video in cab, we can pick up risky driving behaviors, which typically lead to poor driving performance. And risky driving behaviors are things like using mobile phones, other types of distraction, not putting a seatbelt on, and there's also road-facing things we can pick up like following distance, tailgating, where they're about to forward collision warning, and lane departure warnings as well. So all of this rich data we can get from machine vision plays a part, and we can use that in the fleet management system to start once again, come back to these problems that our customers are trying to solve. Clearly, safety performance here is a big one around drivers, and the data that I've just mentioned plays a big role in being able to tell us the safety story for each different customer. And it also plays into fleet optimization, customer satisfaction, and et cetera, et cetera. The two down the bottom on the left there, vehicle inspections. Now, typically with heavier vehicles, these are mandatory requirements in most countries around the world to inspect heavy goods vehicles. And so drivers play a key role in that because they perform those inspections. And typically that's in the past has been paper-based, but it's starting to become more and more digital with apps that provide vehicle inspection functionality on consumer-grade mobile devices that drivers have. And so this becomes a really important source of information in the overall fleet management space because it's one of those leading indicators around vehicle uptime. If a vehicle is put off the road because it's got a defect, well, that's going to affect a lot of things operationally. And the last one is driver fatigue management, driving hours and rest hours and how they're being managed, and also how you use that information to manage your overall operation around scheduling and when trucks can roll, when they can't roll because the driver has to rest, etc. Now on the right-hand side, we can sort of see some numbers there about the types of improvements that we can get in driver behavior when we start to use this telematics data and the video data as well to be able to pull it all together to get an impact for our customers. The sort of the last area that's quite interesting is it's not really telematics as such, but it's complementary information that sits around managing a fleet, and that's really about what these drivers are doing. What are they being asked to do? Are they doing last mile deliveries? They've got tasks they have to go and complete. When do they start those tasks? When do they end them? But what's most important is route planning and navigation. How are they getting to the points where they have the places where they have to actually do that work? And what we know is that one of the leading problems around fuel efficiency is inefficient routing, is driving too far to achieve the outcome you need to achieve. So that can be solved with intelligent route planning. And so if you can measure how well you're doing that at the moment, it can start to highlight opportunities. Well, hang on, if we actually had proper planning and route planning here, we can save ourselves 20% on mileage, which has a proportional impact on fuel burn and vehicle wear and tear over a long period of time. Now, these are really important things to get your head around. And so these play into the fleet optimization space, customer satisfaction, fuel efficiency, and obviously a bigger picture around productivity and continuous improvement within the operational environment. So those are our data sources. Now the question is, now we've got all this data, what are we going to do with it? And the way at Mix Telematics, the way we like to think about this is there's an information experience that we take our customers on. And it starts obviously with acquiring the data and processing it, but then making it available. And what we see is our customers are very diverse, and within each customer there's different roles. People play different roles. You've got people which are more focused on real-time operations and reacting to that to optimize the customer experience and deal with breakdowns and all of those sorts of things. But then you've got people who might be health and safety focused that need different information, and you've got higher level managers that want to see the big picture and want to pull all of that together. So one of the keys to this is to be able to present the information that's derived from telematics data in the right context for the right role. And what this does is also, it takes away a lot of the problem around data overload. So if you're focused on one particular problem in the business, you don't want to see data that's going to confuse the situation, that's not relevant to what you're doing. And that's really a big part of where we see fleet management going in the future. That more and more of the analytical work should be done by the technology platform and less by the actual people, so that when they use the technology, it's telling them where their problems are, it's telling them what's actually happening in real time, and it's telling them from a business intelligence perspective what happened, say, yesterday or in the last week or in the last month. How many trips did we do? How many miles did we do? How much fuel did we burn? Those sorts of things. But what's really important as well when we start to analyze data is you have to analyze it in the right context. You have to present it in the right context as well. So the people that run transport operations, they're not technologists, they're not technical people from an information or software perspective. So we need to be able to tell the story in the right context for them. KPIs that are relevant to their business that help them understand, is what's happening good or bad for us? Are there areas for us to improve? What are the targets that we can set ourselves that we could aim for in the future? And if we achieve them, we receive a certain amount of financial benefit. It makes us more profitable because we've got lower operating costs. We can get to more customers in a day because we're more efficient with routing and those sorts of things. And it can also present information in dollar terms and cost terms, and also in terms of, for example, emissions, which is becoming more and more relevant to transport operations globally in the current environment. So this is the type of information experience that we believe is the future of fleet management. But at the same time, it's important to know that a technology provider can't answer every single question that a customer will have. And we know that we have customers that want to do ad hoc type analysis. They want to think about things in a different way. They want to combine the telematics or fleet management data with data from other systems they have in their business. And so what it's important to understand is that from a telematics system perspective, that data needs to be made accessible for customers to use the tools that they are comfortable with to enable them to do the types of ad hoc analysis that they're wanting to do. Tools like pivot tables in Excel or Power BI visualizations or Tableau or products like that. And also we find that at the really high level with large enterprises, they might have their own data warehouses and their own sort of data analytics platforms and things that they use as well. And so that's one of the keys to data analysis, is to make the data available so customers can self-service and answer those really tricky questions. But if you step back from that, looking at this experience in front of you, to be able to present information to the right person at the right time in the right context that allows them to make the best decision possible. Okay, so the last piece I want to touch on is engaging drivers. Now, this is quite an interesting topic. A few years ago, we did a focus session globally with a number of our key customers. And one of the underlying themes that came back was our customers recognized the challenge of engaging drivers and how important it is to them and the long-term success or sustainability of their business. And they at the same time, they said, we don't have effective tools to be able to do this. No one's really nailed this problem and solved it. And so engaging drivers is something that's becoming more and more important at the moment. But also when you think of it in the long-term future with autonomous driving and things like that, drivers may become less significant in the future, but that future's quite a long way off from a commercial transport perspective. So this is still a really important problem that needs to be dealt with today and in the near future. The first step is around education, and context is everything here. If you can explain to a driver when they come on board into your business what their role is and how the things that they do, how it impacts the operational costs and profitability of the business, and also the customer experience and satisfaction, just that awareness there really gets the engagement process started. Without that context and awareness, drivers don't necessarily understand that. They're just doing what they're being told to do. The second step is to give drivers visibility of the data that's meaningful to them, which paints a picture, tells a story about their performance. And so when you think back to a few slides ago around the telematics data focused on drivers, it's really about surfacing that information to the driver in a way that's easy for them to consume. And this is also about raising awareness. This is where you are today. This is your driving performance as we've measured, and we've got onboard computers and we've got video and we've got machine vision. This is the story it's telling us about your performance. And this is what you can do this is the best place to start if you want to either maintain good performance or improve on poor or average performance. Then we get on to step 3, and that is really what we call a coaching process. It's not about strict management. It's about being constructive and using the data and information that's available from the telematics sources that I mentioned earlier, and presenting them in a way that facilitates a constructive coaching process, and obviously the positive outcomes you get from that. So the first one clearly is real-time coaching in the moment as the driver is driving. And this is where machine vision plays a big role. It can pick up when the driver is distracted, using their phone, following too close, those types of risky driving behaviors which will lead to accidents, and also fuel inefficient driving behavior from a fuel or energy perspective. So that's the first place to start. Next, you've got self-coaching after the fact. End of the trip or end of the shift, the driver in his own space and own time can look at data on that driver engagement app on their phone. They can see information that's simple to understand, and they can see what they've been doing and the key KPIs that are measured or derived from that telematics data. And what we find, our experience is that goes a long way. The self-coaching goes a long way into this process of improvement. Drivers are motivated to become better. You'll struggle to find an employee anywhere in the world that doesn't really want to get better at their job. And people don't come to work to do poor jobs either. They do them to the best of their ability. And here, this coaching is about raising the bar on their abilities through awareness. And the last part is manager-led coaching, where the same information about a driver's performance is presented to the driver manager, and then that enables a constructive conversation about what can we do with a particular driver to get them from where they are today to where we want them to be. And so that's quite important. The last step is really focusing on the previous 3 steps, but it's all about making the whole coaching process much more efficient and taking the burden away from the driver and the driver manager, making it so simple to use that they enjoy using it. And when something is so simple to use, it gets used more often. The more often you use something, the more effective it's going to be from an outcome perspective that our customers are looking for. So we can tell straight away when we look at an organization where drivers aren't even logging into the driver engagement app. And as soon as you get them logging in, you can see the improvements come in the data after that. And so adoption leads to effective outcomes, which come from the investment in this type of technology. But what's really important in this last step is to not focus on what's happening. That's a big part of it, but you also need to try and uncover why we think it's happening. Why is the driver performing the way they are? And be able to provide those insights back to the driver. There's a cause and effect relationship in everything that they do. And a lot of the time with fleet management or telematics data, it's not immediately obvious what those cause and effect relationships are. And it takes an application of advanced analytics to actually uncover those. And a good example is a driver might be a really good driver in fair weather conditions, but as soon as the weather turns poor with rain or snow or fog or things like that, all of a sudden his driving patterns and behavior changes. And being able to determine that that's actually the thing that triggers the transition from good driving to poor driving, that's an insight that you can actually see in data, telematics data today. And then that's when the coaching can come in. Okay, we need to get this particular driver more comfortable in driving in poor weather. How do we do that? And then that's where the intervention comes in, which leads into the last point here, and that's actionable intelligence. It's something that we want to present information to both the driver and the driver manager that allows them to easily understand what am I going to do next? When I come to work tomorrow, what's the one thing I can focus on that's going to make a difference in how my performance is going? Instead of them trying to figure all of that out, we give them actionable intelligence. The technology platform figures it out, ranks it and says, this is what you want to focus on, and we're not going to move on until we've got that one sorted out. So that's really the key. There's an evolution here from education into awareness, into actually doing the intervention of coaching, and then making it much more effective in the long term by making it easier and less burdensome for both parties. So that's the story around engaging drivers. And that's the story around how we think that you can get most value out of telematics data and applying it to your transport operations. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Matthew Hammond. I am Head of Fleet for Altrad Services, and I'd like to give a bit of a conversation with you today about how we have maximised the benefits of telematics across our business. So let me start by saying that telematics is a wonderful tool. It allows us to see real time what our fleets are doing, who's good and who's not so good. It allows us to make assessments and fleet decisions based on real life data. It allows us to analyse trends across our fleets, across specific sectors, and even trends across our drivers. We can analyse and reanalyse specific events, incidents and journeys, and undertake root cause analysis of any and every incident. It gives us the eyes on the world, and it tells us things we didn't even know we needed to know. In a nutshell, telematics is a wonderful, enlightening tool for every fleet. However, all this data won't change a thing unless we learn how to use it. And for me, telematics is one of the many tools to help us build this culture of safety across my fleet. But before we can begin to improve fleet safety, we need to understand where the issues lie. We need to understand which bits of data are relevant and which bits are not. And to do this, we need to first identify what is our end goal? What are we hoping to achieve? And how do we plan on achieving this? Telematics alone won't improve anything. It will simply show us where the issues are. So if we have a really safe fleet and we want to use the system to help us improve fuel usage, for example, then we can identify this as a goal to avoid us being distracted by all the other shiny things the system can do. Once we've identified our end goal and how we're going to achieve this, we can consider how we're going to interact with the wider business. How are we as fleet people going to ensure our drivers understand where the issue is and how to improve? Will we be looking at personal one-to-one approach or a more name and shame leaderboard? And what about visibility? Is this a fleet thing, or do we want the whole business to buy in? Are the board involved? In my experience, having a champion on the board can prove invaluable to help overcome sticky and difficult situations, which we'll inevitably face. And remember to set goals, both short and long term. Don't be afraid to keep everyone who will listen updated on progress. The more buy-in you get, the easier it will be to be accepted. So when I introduced telematics to my fleet, I asked myself the same questions. In my case, the end goal was to reduce incident numbers and increase driver standards. We were seeing a lot of claims which I felt were avoidable incidents and were driver fault. So this was my primary focus. My plan was to use the data to target specific drivers with specific training and education, as well as conducting one-to-one driver conversations related to their driving style. For this, I felt I needed a sponsor within the business, so I presented to our board and I got the MD to support the process. This meant I had the clout to get things done, but I also had to keep the MD informed and up to date on progress, both good and bad. When I started this process, our incident rate was about 32%. My ultimate goal was to halve this, although my published goal to the board and to the MD and to the business was to reduce it by 25% within 12 months. 6 years down the line, we're at 11% with a new target to achieve single-figure claims ratio. So once I'd identified our primary goal, I was able to format the dashboard to focus on the key areas only. This way, we wouldn't be distracted by other data sets. They can wait for a future date. With the data in front of you, it's simple to see where the issues lie and where your time needs focusing first. Green drivers, leave them alone. Red drivers, these guys are going to get the special attention. But just because a driver's red doesn't necessarily make them a bad driver. Several factors could have resulted in a red journey, which is why we look at a driver profiling to identify the true high-risk drivers. By analysing data over a 3-month period, we look for trends in their driving, which indicate a potential for an incident. Example is a driver who's constantly accelerating or harsh braking indicates a lack of attention, and history has shown us this will ultimately result in a driver hitting the car in front. So from this analysis, we know where the issues lie and can then approach the driver with specific data showing them the concerns. Tailor this to a specific e-learning course, and we should then expect to see improvements in the driver's post-intervention. You know, it's interesting when you do this type of intervention with the driver to see the 3 stages of acceptance. At first, they're in denial. Not them, they're the greatest driver in the world, so the data must be wrong. So we sit and we discuss specific events at specific times and days, and the penny begins to drop, and we move into the acknowledgement phase. As we delve a bit deeper into the data and the driver realizes we're not there to criticize but to advise and help, then they enter into the acceptance phase. And this to me is when they become receptive to e-learning and we can see the best results. Now, of course, this isn't always the case. Some drivers never leave the denial phase in front of you. But even with these, we've planted that seed and we do see some improvements, just not as much as the accepting drivers. But as with anything like this, we need to have a consistent process to ensure we gain the maximum benefit from the data. But even then, we can miss things. Drivers might not be bad enough to be red, but be very amber, and we miss them until they have an incident. So this is why we introduced the post-investigation process. Now that sounds much grander than it actually is, but its purpose is to see if the incident could have been prevented. Did we miss something that would have identified the potential risk? And if we didn't, why did it happen? And can it help us in future analysis? The same goes for the e-learning modules. Do we have the relevant modules for the type of issues we're facing, or do they need refreshing? One other area I introduced was periodic classroom courses. These half-day sessions allow us to get a group of drivers together to discuss maybe changes in the law or other changes in company policy, as well as us to re-emphasize the goals and the reasoning behind it. We can share telematics data, camera images, both good and bad, and begin a conversation across the drivers. You know, all these tools help us deliver the message across all levels of business. We've also introduced a driver manager course. So these guys now know what is expected, how they can address the drivers, and visual checks they need to make on both the vehicles and the drivers. So all of that's great, but ultimately it's the person behind the wheel who can make the biggest difference, right? Now, I don't believe drivers set out with the intention of causing damage. Most of the time, external influences come into play which affect how they operate. So driver engagement, both positive and negative, can have a significant impact on how they perform. By using the data, we can educate and train drivers, making e-learning both relevant and beneficial and targeted at specific areas of concern. If we go back to our telematics data, by using this information to educate a driver, explaining with real data the issues, the concerns and the solution, we can fundamentally change their approach to driving and their attitude to risk. Now, this isn't about big wins. This is about marginal gains and small improvements across the fleet. We also look at giving drivers the ability to self-monitor. It's all well and good doing all the training and the analysis and the e-learning, but you need to empower the driver to continue with this process of education, self-improvement. By empowering the drivers with apps to track their own driving scores and event history, we can begin to instill this process of self-improvement. Nothing improves a driver standards more than being worse than the mate. Even though we don't publish a league table or a name and shame, you'd be surprised how many times I hear drivers comparing scores amongst each other. And because they know I have the same device fitted to my vehicle, I'm constantly asked what's my score whenever I get drawn into one of these conversations. It's also had an interesting side effect, which I wasn't expecting at all. Confession. Drivers now call or text me to explain an event that's flagged up even before it's been flagged in the office, because they now understand the bigger picture, and because they can see their actual results. They know what is acceptable and what will be questioned. So if I can just summarize on what we've discussed, data can be great if used effectively, but it can also overwhelm. So ensure before you set off on this, you have a clear vision of what it is you want to deliver. Telematics providers will tell you all the amazing things their systems can do. And without having that clear vision at the beginning, it's easy to get swept up in the excitement and lose track of your goals. Understand your deliverables, set out a structured approach, and update it regularly. It's also key to communicate what you're doing across the wider business, why you're doing it and why. It's that drip, drip, drip effect. Keep it fresh in people's mind. Engage with all levels within the business. Remember, us fleet people live and breathe this, but others in the business will have forgotten and moved on to other things. So we need to keep reminding them. And probably the most important part of all this is to play the long game. Don't expect instant results. When we started on this journey, I thought we would see results instantly. Drivers would improve just because we told them to, incidence rates would tumble, everything would be great. It didn't happen. We had a few false starts before we finally found our rhythm and started to see the results. So don't be afraid of making errors as long as you can learn from them. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, that concludes the recorded presentation section of today's webinar. I'd like to thank our speakers again, and of course today's sponsors, Mixed Telematics. In a minute, we will talk through your questions. Just another reminder that you've still got time to submit any questions you've got to our panelists. I'm really pleased to say we are joined today by Matthew, Andy and Glen, who will hopefully be able to give you some of the information that you've already asked us for. Apologies that we are overrunning slightly. We'll try and keep this next section as quick and to the point as possible. But before we go into the Q&A session, we will look at the results of today's poll. So, as you can see, we asked at the start of the webinar, which of the following do you currently monitor using telematics systems, asking about acceleration, braking and cornering, mileage driven, the brakes taken by drivers, speed, or none of the above. 6% of you said none of the above. 29% said you're monitoring driver brakes taken. 56% said mileage driven. 71% said you use them to monitor acceleration, braking and cornering. And 85% are monitoring driver speed. Who would like to talk about these results among the attendees? Are these what you'd like to see from fleets managers trying to make the most of their telematics systems? Are there any surprises in here, do you think?
I think the biggest surprise to me, it's Matt speaking, is the 6% none of the above. I'd be interested to know what they're monitoring it for. But no, I think the acceleration, braking, cornering, the speed are the obvious ones that most people would use telematics for. I think it gives you the best insight into your fleet, into your drives of what's happening, and that's where most people, in my experience, are using telematics to gain the advantage from. So it's not a great surprise, but yeah, the 6% is intriguing more than anything.
Well, it's Andy. I guess the 6% could just have not engaged with the driver behaviour telematics, or aren't using telematics systems for their safety yet. But I think from my perspective, yeah, no surprises that those people who are, speed is up there. Although, you know, if you've got that speeding data and you're not looking at it, I guess the question is why not? And And obviously, if one of your driver has a speeding related collision and you get investigated and it's shown that you have the data but you're not looking at it, that doesn't put you in a particularly good legal position. I guess the other observation here is that, yeah, 30% of people are monitoring brakes taken by drivers. I'd like to see that a lot higher, because we know that fatigue is one of the big four killers of people on the roads, or big four reasons why serious collisions occur.
Great, thank you very much. We'll move on to some of the questions that we've had submitted today then. So first of all, I suppose this could go to anyone. What issues have you experienced regarding data privacy and GDPR? Glen, would you care to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I think it's one of the challenges we see around data privacy is it's fear of the unknown. And what I mean by that is, if drivers don't have any visibility as to how their data is being used, then that creates a bit of uncertainty and a bit of doubt and fear, and that's a valid cause for concern. And so I think while telematics service providers, the solution providers, generally operate within the GDPR constructs, and they're managing everything as required, that doesn't necessarily give any visibility to the driver as to how their data is being used. It gives the driver some protections about when they want to ask, they're allowed to ask. But I think telematics solution providers need to be a bit more proactive than that, and to actually make it something that's visible to drivers on a regular basis. So that's probably my thoughts on it at the moment.
Thanks for that, Glen, and I hope you found that useful. Another question now. How do you suggest balancing making a feedback app attractive and encouraging its use with the risk of drivers looking at it while it's not safe to do so? And then following on from that as well, what are some good ways to gamify the interaction with drivers?
I think on the app side, we use the driver app, and the app that we use tends to update post journey, so there's nothing sort of in life for them to really be distracted about. Once the journey's finished, it'll tell you your score for that journey, your distance, and bits and pieces like that. So it's definitely sort of designed to be post journey analysed. As far as gamification, it's not something I buy into personally. I don't feel it delivers anything. I'm quite old-fashioned in this way. I think it's quite a serious thing that we're doing with driver safety and telematics, and I think trying to sort of gamify it and dumb it down just detracting, or in my opinion, can detract from what we're trying to achieve. So it's something I've always personally steered away from.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Gamification was a buzzword. It's been around for a while now, and to me, it almost seems a bit superficial. It doesn't really get to the heart of the matter. And I think when you've got people that are really pressed for time, like drivers, like driver managers, that's the key, is to really get to the heart of the matter as quickly as possible. Probably, I think something that's more has more potential to be impactful is around the incentive side of things, as opposed to gamification. I've seen in my time at Mixed Telematics over a number of years, seen different ways in which commercial vehicle drivers are incentivized by their employers to improve performance, and that's only ever shown positive outcomes. And it builds culture, a performance culture as well. That if you get engaged in the process, you'll get something out of it personally from a how you perform your job perspective, as well as something else on top, which just makes the whole experience much more sort of pleasant for the driver, something they can get behind. And I think probably just to go to another level is competition. Peer pressure is a wonderful thing, and that I think also plays a big part of it. But as a manager or a leader within a transport organization, the the trick is to be able to create constructive competition that's going to lead to people encouraging each other to get better, as opposed to less constructive competition where people are competing for recognition or resources to the detriment of their peers. Now, that's something you really don't want to get into, but so I think incentivizing and creating a constructive competition amongst peers, those are the things that we've seen that have proven to be effective over the long term.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of it's Andy here. I was just going to sort of back that last comment up. And when we talk about gamification, that means lots of different things to different people. You know, just simply having that league table where nobody wants to be at the bottom and no manager wants their team to be at the bottom can act as a very simple incentive. You know, most improved drivers, things like that, so that you know, even if you're towards the bottom, you've got a chance of getting recognition, whatever that looks like. So that there's lots of different ways. And going back to the original question about you know, making sure that they're not using the app whilst they're driving. Well, hopefully the app's been designed so that they can't.
Yeah, definitely. I also have experience in the oil and gas industry globally, and it is a very safety sensitive culture in oil and gas, upstream exploration and production. And I've walked around offices and processing plants, and you see people wearing shirts that say, we were the team that achieved 0 lost time injuries in the last 2 years. And they celebrate that type of culture, and that's something that does work. They wouldn't do it if it didn't work. And I think it's directly translatable into commercial driving, commercial transport operations as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. That was a very thorough and informative answer. What about other potential incentivization strategies then? We spoke briefly about driver leaderboards and things like that. Is there anything in your experience you found that it has been effective?
So, yeah,
sorry, Andy, go for it.
Well, from my perspective, it's you know, we see a lot of organisations who've got performance management systems where somebody's performance will go towards deciding how much bonus they get, how much sort of a salary increase they get, things like that, and that's normally based on operational metrics. What I have seen effective is where road safety performance can be included in that for the driver, and also importantly their manager. So their manager has a target based on their team's performance, and the individual driver has targets based on their performance. And if they know that there will be some financial incentive to do that, and that's big enough to perhaps counteract the potential incentive for bad behaviour in those performance metrics, then that can be very effective. But it's getting that balance right is the important thing.
Yeah, I think I'll just add to that. In my experience, what I've seen is the reward or the outcome for the driver has to be something that they value, and obviously money, salary increase or bonuses and things like that. That's a key one. But it's not necessarily always the case. It could be other things that are material but not necessarily money, and it differs from country to country and different types of operational circumstances. But as long as if you understand the people that work for you, your drivers, you will also, if you take the time to understand them, you will understand what they value. And it might be instead of money, it might be time off. It might be more annual leave, etc. There are lots of different things, horses for courses.
Brilliant, thank you for answering that. We are about 20 minutes past the time we said we'd finish this webinar now, and I can see the attendee numbers quickly dropping off. Presumably people have other places to go to. So unless there are any other questions anyone would like to ask, now feels like a good time to wrap up today. I'll just give them a quick second to enter anything people might like to. No, it doesn't look like anything else is coming in. In that case, I would like to now bring the question and answer session to a close. A huge thank you to today's speakers, Andy, Matthew, Glenn, and Jim, and of course to Mix Telematics for sponsoring this webinar. We hope you found today's content and discussions we've had useful and informative, and you've all learned some information we can use to work towards our shared goal of safe and healthy mobility in fleets. Thank you again for listening, everybody. If you would like to continue any of the conversations we've had today, you can do so across our social media channels. We're on Twitter and Facebook, and we are on the Global Fleet Champions LinkedIn page, so please look us up there. The full recording of today's webinar will be made available over the next few days on our YouTube page and will be linked to from the Global Fleet Champions website as well, so you can find it there. Okay, thank you very much for your time again today. The webinar will now conclude. Goodbye.